There are some truly cracked spells in the DLC that are probably going to get nerfed pretty hard, but before that happens, here are the best spells in Shadow of the Erdtree that you need to destroy all those new bosses. Let's go! Let me know which of these spells is your favorite in the comments down below. We'll start with Glintstone Nails and Glintstone Nail, as they're essentially like the same thing, except Glintstone Nail only shoots one of these little nails out, and Glintstone Nails shoots multiple of them. Now, both of these are essentially like okay spammable spells. Like, you can charge them to increase their damage. Because they are finger sorceries, they get a buff from the Maternal Staff and like the Finger Robe, the Magic Scorpion Charm, all that good stuff. Obviously, Godfrey icon if you are charging it up. The downside here is that the damage on neither of them is very good. I tend to prefer Glintstone Nail over Glintstone Nails, as especially for bosses that move around a lot, it's hard for those multiple nails to actually hit the target. They often do miss. Nails does more damage when all of the actual nails hit, but Nail seems to be a bit more consistent in terms of its damage output. But neither of these will replace like your Night Comet if you use Night Comet like I do very regularly, or any of those like just like common spammable intelligence spells. But they're still definitely worth getting if you want to buff them with, say, running some sort of finger themed like roleplay build. They're both pretty good for that, but just worth calling out that neither is like exceptionally good. But both of these come from Count Ymir after completing the first part of his main story quest, where you need to go and find the finger runes, and the first one is actually found down in the Cerulean Coast, which I did cover most of this quest in detail in my Talismans video, which I will link here if you want to go and watch that and just see the full like breadth of that quest, because it does come up a little bit later in this video as well. But it's just something to point out that you will need to make sure you buy them from him. Gravitational Missile is next. This is one of my new favorites that has been added to the DLC. I do love a good gravity spell. Now, Gravitational Missile fires a bolt of gravity that pulls enemies in. Now, they do stagger enemies while the effect is actually going off. It does damage them. Then there's like a final explosion when the missile does disappear. You can only have one of these like gravitational missiles out at a time. So if you do cast another one while one's already out, it cancels out the other one that was already out, probably because the like ridiculousness that can happen from if you had multiple of these out, like staggering most enemies. It would probably not be very well balanced. But either way, it's still quite a solid spell, and you can charge it same as the previous spells here to just increase its overall like potency and damage. Now, I've put this one next on the list here because you can actually get this on your way to the second part of Count Ymir's quest. There is a fallen star beast in the Fingerstone Hill just near the site of Grace there that you'll be able to defeat, and you've beaten a few of these in like the base game anyway. Beat one of those and you'll get the gravitational missile to use throughout the game. Fleeting Microcosm is next. This conjures up a microcosm that pulses with a single wave and disappears in a burst. This is one of the strongest new additions to the intelligence spells category. For one thing, because enemies like do not dodge it whatsoever. The other part is because it is like another finger sorcery, so all the Finger Robe and Maternal Staff, everything can buff this spell as well, and it just does solid damage when it does come out. It has a relatively quick charge time, and enemies don't dodge out of its way, and it like the orb like typically just like pops up underneath enemies, does knock them back a little bit, does do a solid amount of damage when that burst like does actually explode. Really solid like AoE with good damage that can be charged, and you can do additional damage with that new staff as mentioned. So lots of benefits to running this, and this comes from the second part of Count Ymir's quest that you'll need to do after you have found the second Finger Ruins, which is past the Hinterlands area, after you have used the O Mother Gesture, which you can get from Boney Village, to unlock the secret passage behind the Shadowkeeper back gate. Glintblade Trio is next. Now, this is ye olden magic Glintblade, except there's 3 of them and you shoot them out. So the same effect happens here, where you get that little bit of delay when the 3 projectiles spawn and then they do shoot out. Because of this, when enemies that you fight that often like dodge in like PvE settings, they will often, you know, they'll do their dodge when you cast it. They will have stopped dodging by the time the actual effect goes off and does hit them. The downside to this spell is that even though it's 3 magic Glintblades that are going out, it doesn't do triple the amount of damage, unfortunately, though I wish it did. But it is still a solid spell, right? Like, it doesn't cost too much. It's relatively cheap in terms of SP and stamina cost, being at 19 FP right now. So you get like a cheap spell that does deal solid damage. It's very consistent, as like the Glintblade Trio that does go off will like track enemies very well. So you get that bit damage benefit from it there. Now, the Glintblade Trio is actually found in Castle Ensis around the middle of the overall dungeon. Now, there's that iron gate past like Miquella's Cross that you'll need to pass through, and there's a section here where you'll be able to like climb some ladders and some rooftops, and you can actually jump down here via this rooftop and actually find it on a corpse hanging on the ledge that you can see on the screen here. The rings of spectral light is next. Now, this creates a ring of spectral light that fire in unison. This one can also be charged to increase its overall damage. Now, this does do like, it's like a part of like the ghost flame spells, so it does frostbite as well. It is still like just magic damage though. It's pretty cheap overall, like it's not very an expensive spell that you'll have to like use, but one thing to point out with this one is that it's not super consistent in terms of like it's actually tracking like the rings being able to find the target. If they do move around a lot, they will often miss, but it does deal a okay amount of damage. It does require you to have a little bit of faith, but it is a death spell, so that's why. But it's only 18 faith, so it's not like too much. Now, I wouldn't use this like specifically if you were trying to like proc frostbite, because it can proc frostbite, but it is such a slow build up. Like, I wouldn't be replacing like Undula's Moonblade, which is what I typically would use to proc frostbite for this. But the benefit here is that this is a ranged spell, like much bigger range that can actually proc it compared to being in the close range of Undula's Moonblade and having to use that to try and get it off. Now, if you want to find this one, it comes from Caro's Hidden Grave, which is located past the Grand Altar of Dragon Communion. So if you are starting from there, which you can get to, by the way, from heading right after you've defeated the dragon, after the dragon pit's terminus. Now, from there is a dragon that you'll be able to climb on, which will give you access to this like above area of the Cerulean coast. And then you'll find a gravebird statue with some gravebirds around it that is where you can actually locate the rings of spectral light. The Blades of Stone is next. Now, this summons rock blades from the earth, and this is fantastic because it deals physical damage. I love these ones in this category, like the gravitational ones that deal physical damage, as most of them deal magic, so you get the benefit there if you're fighting something that has that magic damage resistance. Now, this will shoot out one like blade of stone, but if you charge it, it actually shoots out 3, and the 3 deal a really high amount of damage, which is quite valuable. The benefit to this is obviously the damage output does decent stagger, plus it's physical damage compared to magic, like most of these magic spells. However, it's not great at hitting moving targets. If you're fighting targets that don't move a whole lot, like larger targets and stuff, deals exceptional damage. It hits them very easily. But if you're fighting smaller targets that like to zoom around the battlefield, like Millennia, something like that, it does make it a little bit difficult because they'll often move out of the space of this, like by the time you actually get it off. So it's not super beneficial in those encounters, but still a worthwhile spell in some of those other encounters. And you get this by trading in the Remembrance of the Wild Boar Rider to Enya at the Round Table Hold. That's Commander Gaius that you'll need to beat at the Shadow Keep back gate, and then you'll be able to grab the Blades of Stone. The Vortex of Putrescence is next. Now, this one is an interesting one that I decided to put on this list because I wanted to talk about it and essentially advise you, if you're only going to use one of these remembrances, that maybe not to get this one. But essentially what this is it's another death sorcery, so it does require 26 faith in order to be able to use. You'll shoot your staff up in the air and deal these like ghost flame like jets that are like shoot out of it, and they'll land on the ground, and then they'll like explode to like ghost flame. Now, this does deal magic damage, but it can trigger frostbite because it is like ghost flame, so you get the benefits there. Does require a bit of having faith, which you might not have if you're just a pure intelligence build. It's got a relatively high FP cost, especially considering the effort it does deal, and because it's a remembrance spell, it takes up 2 of your memory slots as well. So not a lot of good things going for it, personally, I would say, especially when you consider that like, but you get this off, right, and then it does that like circle around you, and then it explodes like inwards. It's very easy to miss targets. The range here isn't great. Often, like by the time you've used this spell, you've like taken a hit because you've got to be close enough to enemies to like get this off. So I wouldn't say it's a great overall, and if you are going to use the Remembrance of the Putrescence to trade into Enya at the Round Table Hold, you probably want to grab the Cleaver instead if you are looking to decide between one of these, and probably pick the Great Axe over this if you are trying to choose. Now, the most broken spell in the DLC at this current moment is Impenetrable Thorns. Now, this summons a Impenetrable Thorns from the earth, like 3 different waves that shoot towards the enemy. Each of these waves deals solid damage and a massive amount of blood loss buildup. What's quite beneficial about this, I guess you could say beneficial, is that you can hit each target with all 3 of them, and the amount of bleed up and damage it does when you hit all 3 on the targets all at once is just absolutely insane and is definitely going to get nerfed. Like, the amount of damage you can chunk off enemies by using this is quite ridiculous. Now, because this is like a thorn sorcery, you can buff it with the Alberic's robes as well as the Staff of Guilty. You've also got staffs that scale with arcane that really benefit from this, like say the Albinoric staff or the new maternal staff, right? So plenty of value in terms of how you want to build this out, but right now in any sort of case this is like pretty broken, and it's very strong, and you should definitely be using this. Right now, in order to grab this, if you start from the dark chamber entrance, which is the entrance to the boss room in the Shadow Keep, if you backtrack to where you would have beaten that Fire Knight and then head down onto the ledges there as you're like heading back in towards like the storehouse, you'll notice there's actually a section you can jump off, and as you jump down there's like a bat down there, so just be careful. But in that platform is actually where you'll find the impenetrable thorns for you to pick up and absolutely shred all of the bosses until it gets nerfed. But let me know your favorite on this list in the comments down below. Thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.